Welcome to Building While Flying, a Sasha Group podcast where we interview business leaders about how they tackle challenges, stay resilient, and navigate ever-changing skies. Welcome to Building While Flying. Today, continuing on our theme of early stage businesses, we're delving into the travel space. Welcome Sam Patil, the founder and CEO of Well Traveled Club, a members-only platform designed to reduce the pain of planning for travel and replace it with enjoyment. Described as a home for a new generation of travelers, foodies, and adventure seekers, Travel Club offers community, perks, and more to its growing membership. Welcome to Building While Flying, Sam.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, great to have you. And who doesn't love discussing travel, especially on a rainy day in Brooklyn on my end? I know you're working on the West Coast.
I'm in LA, so it's not raining, but I still love talking about travel. So I'm excited to chat.
So before we dive in, let's just hear a bit more about your background. So what is that history that led you to come to decide to start a members-only travel platform?
Yeah, in the pandemic too. What a great question.
Interesting choice. Yeah, as everyone ceases to move entirely.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Yeah. Talk about an elephant in the room. The well-traveled story started in 2019 or so when I came up with the idea. But I think my connection to travel and, what eventually turned into this company started so much earlier than that. So I always like to share a couple of things with people. The first is that I took my first international flight at 6 months old.
Nice.
So I was exposed to traveling really young. I was very lucky. And then I'm actually not from the US. I'm British. I was born and raised there until
Wait,
I was
we
11.
did not discuss this.
Did we not talk about this? Oh, yeah.
Wow. Yeah. Okay, that's going to totally derail this conversation, but we'll have to revisit it.
And then the eventual question I usually get is, but you sound like you're from LA. Which is true. And I think the reason for this is when you're 11 and you show up to California, we moved to Sacramento in Northern California, and you've got like a Spice Girls backpack, a British accent, like you are definitely not cool. Kids think you're a freak. You get made fun of. I would hate reading aloud in class. I would say a word funny and then it would just be eruptions of laughter. And I was like, this is miserable. I'm going to change my accent. And here we are today. And I'd be so much cooler in the US if I had an accent now, which my sister still does. My parents still do. My sister went back to England for college. So that's probably a big part of it.
Yeah, I bet. Those formative years, it really matters what age you are. I came to the States only 12 years ago and I'm so baked accent. It's not going anywhere.
Yeah. The best part of this is we had like a brief stint in New Jersey when I was 2, which is actually where my sister was born. And you can see on like home videos from the time, my accent starts to do some really weird stuff. You've got this like British Jersey kind of accent coming through. And then I also went through a period where I was calling everybody darling when I was like 3, which my mom was like, it was just so strange. Like you'd just be like, darling, and you're like this 2-3-year-old kid. And people were just like, that's odd. So yeah, I've gone on a journey and I've ended up with an LA, California accent.
That's amazing. I feel like there's a definite bit of absolutely fabulous going on there, which kind of darling thing. That's brilliant.
100%.
So, oh wow. So early traveler and also international like DNA. Yes. And I guess it sounds like a little bit of a cultural chameleon, which is obviously sometimes goes hand in hand with the love of travel too.
Yeah, I think so. I think we talked a little bit about this before. It was really important to my parents. Travel has always been important to my parents. And so I think it was just something that they wanted to pass on to us, me and my sister, in terms of exposing us to different countries, cultures, getting us uncomfortable and getting us used to discomfort. And also, I think when you're a kid, a lot of times your entire world ends right in front of your face. And so I think they wanted to just slap that right out of us. And so they would take us to all these different places, and partially because they wanted to go and partially because they're like, this will be good for you too. And so I think that it just taught me so much about the world around me, but also I think myself as well. And one of the things that I've found is that we are all so much more alike than we are different. And I think when you spend time in other countries and connect with other people that are different to you or have different backstories or speak different languages, of different styles, there's always some point of connection that you end up finding with them. And I think it just creates a lot of empathy for each other. And I think the world would be a better place if everyone was able to travel more freely and connect more freely and all of that. So that's kind of core to me, I think.
That's wonderful. So that's a definite undercurrent of a purpose for you. And then how does that connect to actually going about founding a members only platform?
So I come from consumer subscription. I've worked at a few companies. So Dollar Shave Club being the most recent, and then previously Pandora, and then I was at Snapchat in the middle. So there's a few things about those different, I think a lot of things about working at those different companies really shaped how I thought about approaching this sort of problem or the space I wanted to play in and the brand I wanted to create. But during my time at those different companies, I spent most of my time helping them launch and grow their marketing operations overseas. I was traveling all the time, like once a month internationally, often by myself. And so I think that's where I first ran into this. I don't really feel like there are platforms or communities or tools out there that are designed for me as a young female traveler. And I just started looking at this space, and you realize the hospitality industry, there are a lot of women in it, but they're not really in leadership positions, and they're not running companies. They're not founding companies. Like the majority of founders in this space are men. So I felt, we talked a little bit about this Bumble comparison. It felt like a space that was really dominated by a lot of masculine energy, when in reality, a lot of times it's really women that are making all the purchasing decisions in this space and really controlling a lot of that spend. So I wanted to just approach this from a different perspective around what are important to women traveling? Like, how can this be different? How could this look a bit different? And to me, I'd really seen the value of creating membership communities and building around that sort of sense of belonging that I feel is really central to travel as well, feeling like you have a place that you belong. So we really lent into that. And that's how we thought about the origin of the brand and why I wanted to create it and all of that. Yeah.
And you described the platform as a home, which obviously is deliberate for that reason. And just for the benefit of those listening, would you just do a quick recap of the core pillars of what the membership offers?
Yeah. So as part of your membership, you get access to our content platform and our community. So you can think of it like the nuts and bolts. There's one similarity that we would have to like a Yelp or TripAdvisor. So user-generated content, and people can leave reviews and upload photos and share their experiences. I will say the similarities pretty much stop there. Everything on our platform is really recommended. If it's on there, it means that someone from our team thinks it should be there, or another member has recommended it as somewhere that they think someone else should go. And the idea is to help you have a more personalized discovery experience that you're finding people and content that helps you get inspired for a future trip, and then actually helping you connect with people on the platform. You can message other members, you can ask them questions. We have some local experts in different countries that are really excited to share their experiences with you. And then when it comes time to book your trip, we can actually help you book those accommodations. So you have some pretty great member perks when you do book with us and at one of our partner hotels, primarily booking hotels right now.
Awesome. That's so interesting, because one of the things you said right at the beginning about what it is that travel means to you, you talked about perspective and empathy. And I feel like that coming in at it through the angle of connecting a community and discovery, but not only from fellow travelers, but also to the people at the other end, at the destination, is so much about creating that connection and empathy with people in other places. Those at the other end that sometimes get forgotten or treated like just the destination and no more.
Yeah, exactly. There's a lot of talk about powering discovery through algorithms. And I do think there's a piece of personalization there that is important and is a layer that you can add on. But I tend to think that travel is more about people than it is about features. And so we wanted to build technology that actually fostered those connections rather than just putting something out there that was completely driven by tech. Because I think about, if I have an algorithm or a website or 3 different websites tell me to go to restaurant A, all I really need is for 2 friends to tell me to go to restaurant B, or 2 people I trust to tell me to go to restaurant C, and I'm not going to restaurant A.
It trumps all of that convenient first thing on the Google search immediately. It's so interesting, that point about it being more about people than features. I'm interested to hear your perspective, because I think this takes us straight into a conversation about the space, because so much of the current industry is really kind of optimized around convenience and the kind of algorithmic efficiency of getting you good deals. And what you're talking about is humanity. But it's a tough space. When you think about the cutthroat nature of some of the big dogs out there, talk a bit more about this differentiator that will help set Well Travel Club apart from some of those behemoth players.
Yeah, I think, my biggest frustration with this space is it's become so transactional in terms of everything is really focused around the transaction of booking a trip. This is how companies build out their monetization strategy. There's not a lot of thought around like the customer service side of it. I think anyone that's booked a hotel on like hotels.com or like Expedia can probably attest to that. All have our own horror stories. And I just think that things have gotten out of whack and we need like a level set here. And I think so much about travel and discovery is about building trust. And I think that has really been eroded by the majority of brands. I think we talked about this. If I bring up TripAdvisor, Yelp, Expedia, you're probably not thinking, yes, the trusted brands of our time. So I think it's really time for a level set. And so that's why we are approaching it from this. I think trust is our core brand promise. And then you start to get into secondary one that builds off of that is quality, right? But I think that this idea that it doesn't have to be this race to the bottom. There's more to travel than just getting a good deal. There's the experience that you're going to have from it. And so for our travelers, most of them are in this gray area where they have graduated from this budget traveler who's really focused on price, but they're not a luxury traveler. And what tends to happen is in this industry, both of those groups of people get a lot of attention. They have a lot of resources, but all the folks that are in this middle area are a little bit like homeless. So we wanted to create a home for them to say, hey, you might be okay paying a little bit more for comfort or convenience or for a better experience. If this boutique property that has this like great experience and a lovely breakfast and like all these fun, like interesting things is maybe $50 a night more than like a Best Western, most of our travelers are prioritizing the experience, and price is oftentimes a secondary consideration. Yeah.
So I like, as always with these fabulous conversations, I have three directions I want to go in. But one thing you said that I just want to just quickly hop back to is you mentioned things that got out of whack and it's time for a kind of reset. And then earlier on, you also mentioned the elephant in the room of starting in the pandemic. Is there an element of having started at this like weird world breaking moment, especially when it comes to the travel industry, that almost primed that opportunity? Do you see it like that at all?
Yeah, I think so. It definitely affected how we thought about and approached the product and even just the content that we were creating. And I think the biggest thing about it is, at the time when we were launching, companies like Booking.com, their revenue had just gone to $0. It was all tied up in booking. Whereas for us, we didn't even launch with a booking option. It was really around the content and the community. And so I think because of everything going on with the pandemic, and I think at the time, like travel got really emotionally charged on social media. There was a lot of like travel shaming and kind of like complicated emotions around it. And you never really knew what was going on with someone though, right? Like maybe I had to cancel my wedding and my honeymoon and I just wanted to go for a staycation with my husband, or like maybe I couldn't see my grandma and I was just looking to like go and get out of my house for a night. So there were so many complicated emotions about it. And I felt like there were people that still felt like they needed to get out of their house because they were going crazy. And so I think for us, we became this hopeful, more like happy corner of the internet for people where they could come and like daydream about a future trip or find somewhere that they felt like comfortable or safe going. We had a lot of people like go to like Under Canvas, which is this like fun glamping company.
I've heard of them.
I mean, yeah, it's super cool. So I think a lot of that definitely influenced how we saw ourselves creating value for that customer at that point in time, and allowed us to really create a lot of trust with them right off the bat.
That's so interesting. I love that. We've had a couple of other early startup stories that began in a different part of an offering from where like a traditional, like if you were going after investors, they'd be like, you need the money making engine first. And it's so interesting that as a result, and we talked a bit about this the other day, that going in through the content and also through this kind of closed community at a time when like the wild west of social platforms is like not always the friendliest place. To exactly your point about like travel shaming. It seems like it was a really great moment and an opportunity to build something that then you could layer value on top of. It's great.
Yeah.
What have you learned about your audience that surprised you the most? It sounds like you've got a really clear sense of, it's almost like this middle, right? They're not the bargain hunter, but they're not yet the luxe. And maybe they never will be the luxe traveler.
Yeah.
What
it's possible, yeah.
Is there, now that you've obviously spent some time growing and curating this group of people, what surprised you about what you're learning or how they're interacting with the platform and each other?
I think one of the things that surprised me the most is how much people want to share their favorite places or contribute content. Because I get this question a lot of like, oh, it's user-generated content. You probably have a cold start problem. And I was kind of like, not really. Almost 60% of our members have contributed content in some way. And that's very high. And there's this like rule of social media, right? It's like the 99-1 rule. 90% lurkers, like 9% of people contribute. And then you have these 1% of power users. And so our contribution rate is so much higher. And I really wanted to dig into that. But also what we noticed is, so whenever someone joins the club, we ask them in their application, why do you want to join? And even at that stage, before they've even joined the community, it's a lot of, I'm looking for inspiration. I want to connect with others, but also I've traveled so much and I would love to share my favorite places with other people that would be excited to receive that information. So I think of it like you and I, we have a relationship now. We've met a few times, we've talked. And if you were like, I'm coming to LA, Sam, I would love to know where you think I should go. I would be so excited to tell you this. But if somebody like random on Twitter is like, where should I go in LA? I'm like, I'm not going to put the effort into doing that. I don't know you. I don't know anything about you. So I think because it's built around membership and community, it creates, again, that sense of belonging, that sense of camaraderie that like really gets people excited to share their favorite places because they know it's going to be well received. They know that people are here to find that content. And then it creates this like flywheel of, I'm going to give something because I know I'm going to get something out. Or I'm going to reply to this member who DM'd me a question because I had a question the other day and someone responded to me. So I think just the appetite for that did surprise me because I was like, is anybody going to contribute anything? Are we going to have to do all of it? But in the right environment where you like embrace that vulnerability and also make it like fun and exciting for them to share, we've seen that just like work really well.
It makes so much sense. It's also interesting. It's totally piquing my kind of growing hypothesis around, there's like a flywheel of consumer behavior, right? And like the way that the social platforms have evolved and how people's behaviors on them have evolved. Like the early days of Facebook where people coalesced around an interest and had these like really like earnest conversations with each other that weren't interrupted by ads. And it's come back through a couple of places. One, like the pure interest graph or the interest graph of TikTok, where like it really is truly about what is for you. But then the other flip side is these more dedicated groups. We've all been trained now that we can make content all day long and everyone's a maker and people are making TikToks, but quite often into the ether to an audience of no one. But in a space where your contribution is welcomed and in some cases acted upon, it's like extra validating for people who actually kind of have got past the idea of pure lurking and want to put their stuff out there.
Totally. I think you hit the nail on the head. And this whole marriage between interest graphs and social graphs, I think is so interesting. And like how obviously Facebook started with the social graph and TikTok started with the interest graph. And now they're kind of both meeting in the middle. It needs a little bit of both, right? If I'm someone that's traveling, I really want to, I have friends who, you know, are great at recommending restaurants, but I would never want like a recipe recommendation from them because they don't cook. So in the same way that we sort of organize those things in our real life, it's the same with travel. Like I like travel with my dog, right? So I would love recommendations from other people that have traveled with their dog if I'm looking to travel with my dog, not necessarily like somebody that hasn't had that experience, right? Like it's all about the mutual sort of like connection. And I think that contributes to this ongoing contribution and engagement and all of that.
Yeah, it's great. I was having a conversation with someone earlier on today about the travel space. And one of them was around Airbnb has seen this like insane spike of engagement and success with its local experiences. You've mentioned at the moment it's more hotels, but you're thinking about that down the line. Are you seeing that same level of interest on kind of experience side, or what's your view on that side? the opportunity?
Yeah, I think so. I think also we've seen a lot of interest in people wanting to connect with each other, like within the membership community. So one of the things that we have on the roadmap for next year is building out like a really robust membership directory that you can maybe like opt into and filter by like location and interest and things like that. Because there's so often times where, even me and my husband were on a trip last September, we went to Spain, and, like we're having a drink at the bar, I'd be like, man, it'd be super cool if there were like another cool couple that we could hang out with. But like, how do you find that? How do you filter for that? So if you're part of at least like a membership community, it's almost like this security blanket of like, well, this person's like probably not a serial killer. Like we probably have something in common.
At least I know, like I can track them down.
Yeah, there's some vetting, right? So we're like, it'd be so cool if we could know if other members were here. And we have had that a few times where people will connect locally on the ground. My sister, for example, my sister lives in New Zealand. And she like called me one day because she was, oh my gosh, there's this girl on the platform who's like saving all of the spots I recommended to her wish list for her trip. I want to reach out to her and I want to talk to her about it. And I was like, yeah, you should do that. And my sister's like, hey, like I see you're saving all these places. Like I live in New Zealand. If you want to grab a coffee when you're in town, would love to meet you. And they had this kind of back and forth.
I love it.
Stuff like that is super, super cool. So we do see a big appetite for that. And I'll say one thing interesting on the Airbnbs is because I ask people about this a lot. Do you do both? Most of our members will say, yeah, I book both. What's interesting is women traveling alone will not stay in an Airbnb. I would say almost 95% of them are like, I don't feel safe. I don't like that someone else has keys to this house. I've heard things about like cameras in these places. I want to be in a hotel where there's a guy at the front desk and I know that I'm like in my room and there's cameras and I'm safe. So I think because we have so many women on the platform, and like I'd say of trips booked, like most of the time it's 2 people. And then the second highest like grouping is solo travel and it's mostly women. So
that's fascinating and intuitively makes so much sense. And I think about my own travel behavior. I know, I think I also have, whether or not this is the right mental kind of perception, that the value comes when you put more than one person in the Airbnb, if it's like a bigger space.
Totally. Exactly. Yeah.
So interesting. So you've got a whole interesting year ahead. And I'm curious to know, you're launching the pandemic, which is arguably the toughest time. You've built you got so far like 1,500 members and growing, which like is a fantastic and engaged base.
Yeah. Everyone's
raising their head above the parapet, looking to travel. But at the same time, the economy's in a weird place. Mixed messages from the economy and pent up travel being on kind of both sides of that. Where do you see the opportunity? Like, what are you excited about? And like, what do you think the challenges are going to be going into 23?
Yeah, it's so interesting. I got to say, I think we're talking about it. I'm going to have great fodder for like a book or like a very long panel discussion one day about like, it was sort of just like one thing after the other. And I was like, okay, if we get through this thing, if we get through this thing.
Nothing like resilience as a leader. Yeah.
Oh my God. Yeah. Talk about resilience. So there's a couple things going on. Despite what's happening with the economy, I think people are actively choosing to spending more on travel and experiences than they are on physical goods.
Yeah.
This was starting to happen pre-pandemic. I think that really drove that home. You never know. Maybe I won't be able to, I'm about to cancel this trip to Japan. I won't be able to leave my house for 2 years. As long as people have that sort of like concept in the back of their mind, I think it's going to be something that they prioritize. And then this study came out recently, essentially like validating that and saying people are expecting to spend more on travel over the holidays and into next year. And they're actually like more likely to cut spending on like groceries than they are their travel spending. Wow. So like the only thing I think that was below travel in terms of cutting that spend is Spotify and like music subscriptions and things like
interesting.
That. And like Netflix. But it was only like just above. And I think that's probably likely mostly due to the pandemic and people feeling like they were really trapped for a couple of years and they like bought all this crap. They bought all this stuff. Now they want to go do stuff.
Now they're weighed down by all their things.
Yes. I had someone reached out. They wanted to gift a membership to someone last week. And so things like gifting someone with a trip, or we've heard from members like, I'm not buying my mom this expensive gift. I'm actually going to take her on a weekend trip to Sonoma or something like that. I think that there's a lot of opportunity there. And then the second thing is I think it was a Business Insider article, and I can't remember the stat now, but it was like some huge percentage of Gen Z are still living at home with their parents. And it's created this like massive savings that they haven't been pumping into rent. And it's creating this like luxury boom. of them spending on they're spending this
way
money
more discretionary income. Yeah. Interesting. Yeah.
Which is something I hadn't really thought about before, but I thought was really interesting and makes a lot of sense.
I also think that the fact that we can now record and digitally own representations of our experience in such a reliable way. I think people used to see travel as a thing that you do and it's over and it's so ephemeral. Mm-hmm. But actually now it's every one of those memories is now completely locked away in your phone and you can revisit time and time. Like the value of doing it is like a window into a permanent memory.
Totally.
Which I think before was, I mean, it was still the case, but just maybe not as explicitly attributable as a valuable thing forever.
I think it's become part of people's identities.
Yeah.
Again, young people can't afford to buy houses and there's a lot going on. They're spending money on cars. And so they're conserving their cash in these other ways and delaying these big life purchases, delaying having kids. And instead their identity and their sort of self-worth isn't wrapped up in, I bought this house. It's, my proud moment. It's I took this awesome 3-week trip to whatever, all over Europe or Asia and look at all this.
I did my Eat, Pray, Love. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So exciting. I guess with that as a macro view and really interesting insights there. Yeah. What are you most excited about as you jump into 23?
Oh, that's such a good question. I'm most excited about, we're working to launch a lot of community features within the platform. So that membership directory I talked about. And I'm really excited to help members make more of these connections on the platform and also meet some members. We want to host some member meetups. Nothing energizes me more than talking to the people that use our product and love it. So I'm really excited to just take the company into this next phase of growth. Candidly, I think we did things maybe a little bit differently to how a lot of Silicon Valley approaches building a startup, which is this growth at all costs mentality. And I think I instead was I want to make sure that we have built a really strong foundation for this house before we just start throwing bricks on top of it. So I feel we've really done an amazing job of doing that. And so I'm just excited to take it to the next level and continue to expand and grow and build out the brand and community.
We recently spoke with a new VC fund that is focusing on female founders of color. And one of the things they were talking about was exactly what you just mentioned, which is the traditional way of looking at growth as evaluating a startup as growth at all costs. But then the example they use, which is actually the exact scenario that you have, is if it's a community-based brand, it takes time to mature a community and for that community to become a truly valuable asset that not only kind of helps scale the brand, but also drives such incredible insight and huge flywheel of value that comes out of that. And I think what you just described is exactly that. So it'll be
absolutely
thrilling to see what comes next for Well Travel Club.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you very much for joining us. It's been really cool hearing about the origins, despite starting in the pandemic lockdown. I loved how you described it as a hopeful corner of the internet, which now is really burgeoning into a community. So congratulations and excited to see what comes next for you. Thanks, Samantha.
Thank you so much, Katie. This was so much fun.